The 20.2e notes covers probability and standard deviation. And so we start out here with the definition of probability. So the probability of an event is a number between 0 and 1 that indicates the likelihood the event will occur. An event that is certain to occur will have a probability of 1. An event that cannot occur would have a probability of 0. And then an event that's equally likely to occur or not to occur, like flipping a coin and having it be heads or tails, is equal to 1/2 or 0.5. In the next part right here, you see the ratio for probability is the number of outcomes in event A. And so sometimes you'll see the top of this referred to as the number of successes. And then in the denominator, you put the total number of outcomes. So you'll say that it's successes in the top and then total outcomes in the bottom. So in this first example, you're given a histogram and it asks you to find the probability that a data value will fall in the specified interval. And so you want to look at the picture first and see how it's broken up. This first bar has 6, this next bar has 5, the next one has 3, and then the last one has 1. And so it's helpful to start by adding these up to figure out the total. And so for this one, the total number of values that's represented by this histogram is 15. Once you have the total, then you want to go back and look and see with which interval you're being asked to figure out the probability. So they're asking how many people are watching TV between 6 and 17 hours. So this bar starts the 6 and then this bar finishes the 17. And so the number of people in this example that watch TV between 6 and 17 hours are represented here. So there are 8 people who watch TV between 6 and 17 hours, and so the probability of landing within that interval would be 8/15. A lot of times we'll leave our answer like this, written as a fraction, but it's also helpful to point out that you could write it as a decimal, and you could also take this and you could convert it into a percent, and so sometimes probabilities are represented as percents. In example B, we'll start by going through and labeling the bars to figure out the height of each one so that we can figure out the total. And so for this one, when you go through and add up the numbers, you get that there are 31. Once you know the total, then you can go back and you can figure out with which interval you're trying to look at. So this one says 60 to 70. And so here starts 60 and then here ends 70. So we're looking on this interval right here. And then to figure out the probability that a data value would fall in that specified interval, it's going to be these two numbers added up. So the 6 goes in the top and then the 31 goes in the bottom. And so for this one, your answer would be 6/31. You could also write it as a decimal, or you could write your answer as a percent. On example number C, we'll start the same way. And so on this one, when you add up all of those numbers, you get that the total is 18. And then for this one, we're being asked to find the probability that a data value will fall within the range from 31, which is 0 in that bar, right, to 46. And so we're looking on this interval right here. And so for that, we're going to say that the probability is 2/18. Now notice on this one, 2/18 can reduce. They can both divide by 2. And so for this one, we'll write our answer as 1/9. So you always want to reduce your fraction if possible. Remember that you can also write it as a decimal or as a percent. And then just add a little note on your paper here that if the fraction can be reduced, you always want to reduce that fraction when possible. In addition to talking about the probability of events happening, we can also talk about their standard deviation intervals, and so this is a way of talking about how spread out the data are. And so in this example, you're given a formula here, and it kind of looks pretty complicated, mainly because you don't know what these symbols are yet. So this X bar stands for the mean of the data, and so this is the mean, and this is the mean. And then this other symbol right here stands for standard deviation. It says that to figure out the interval for data that are within one standard deviation of the mean, we're going to take the mean and we're going to subtract the standard deviation, and then we're going to take the mean and we're going to add the standard deviation. So we're going to figure out how spread out the data are from the mean. So in this next example, it says given the mean and standard deviation, find the interval for data that are 1 and 2 standard deviations from the mean. Remember from your notes that standard deviation is how spread out the data are. And so you're going to put the X in the middle. And so to start, to figure out the data that would be within 1 standard deviation from the mean, I'm going to take the mean, and on this side, on the lower side, I'm going to subtract the standard deviation, and then on this side, I'm going to add the standard deviation. And so when I minus these two numbers from one another, I'll get 0.6, and then when I add the two numbers together over here, I'm going to get 5.4. To find the answer for the second part of the question, we're going to do the same thing again. We're trying to find the data that are within 2 standard deviations from the mean, and so when we do that for the second part, you can minus the 2.4 from this number, and you can minus the 2.4 from this number again, or you can go back and use the number 3, right? The number 3 was the mean, and so to find the standard deviation that are within 2 from the mean, you're going to subtract the 2.4 twice, and then on this side, you're going to add the 2.4 twice. And so simplifying that, on this left side, I'm going to get negative 1.8, and then on the right side I'm going to get positive 7.8. And so this answer represents the range of data that would be 2 standard deviations from the mean, either above or below. And so on B, we're given the mean, we're given the standard deviation, and so on this one we're going to do the same thing. So we'll add and subtract the standard deviation from the mean once, and then we'll do it a second time as well. And so in this first example, I minus the 8.2 and I added the 8.2 to the mean. And so the data that are within 1 standard deviation would fall within the range 10.1 to 26.5. And then I'll do the same thing again to find the data that fall within 2 standard deviations from the mean. And so here to get this one, I subtracted the standard deviation from the mean twice, and I added the standard deviation to the mean twice. And so I get for this one that the data that fall within 2 standard deviations of the mean is going to be the data between the range 1.9 to 34.7. So on the second page of the notes for today, the questions are worded similarly. It says, given the set of values, find the interval for data that are within 1 standard deviation from the mean. So for this one, we just need to find it within 1 standard deviation. But notice how the question is different. On this one, you're given a list of numbers. On the previous page, when you were answering the questions, the mean was provided for you on both of these examples. But on this example here, the mean is not provided for you. And so what we'll want to do on this one is we'll want to start out by figuring the mean. Also notice that on the previous questions, the standard deviations were provided for you. And on this question, the standard deviation is not provided for you. So what makes this question different is that we're going to have to go through and figure out the mean, and then we're also going to have to go through and figure out the standard deviation. Alright, so remember, to figure out the mean, the numbers do not have to be in order. You're going to take the numbers and you'll add up each number in the list, 1 plus 3 plus 2 and so on. And so for this one, when you add them all up, you get 52, and then you have to divide that by the number of numbers in the list, and this one has 16 numbers in the list. And so for this one, for your mean, you'll get 3.3. Then to figure out the standard deviation, there is a way to calculate the standard deviation by hand. There's a formula for it, but it's beyond the scope of this course. And so to figure out the standard deviation, go up to the top of the assignment. You're going to use the link for standard deviation that your teacher provided to you. And so you'll type these numbers into the list on that website. And when you do the standard deviation for this one, you're going to get that the standard deviation is 2.6. And so again, you'll use the website link to calculate that and figure it out. Just add a note here that to figure out the standard deviation, you're going to use that online calculator. Once you have the mean calculated and you've used the online calculator to figure out the standard deviation, then you're ready to answer the question. So the interval for data that are within 1 standard deviation from the mean are going to be, and then remember from the previous page, you're going to take the mean and subtract the standard deviation, and then on the other side you're going to take the mean and you're going to add the standard deviation. And then you'll simplify by subtracting the numbers on the left and adding the numbers on the right. And for this one, we just have the one answer. So the data that fall within that range that are within 1 standard deviation of the mean are going to be the numbers between 0.7 and 5.9. On the final example, it's the same as the one up above. On this one, you're going to start by figuring out the mean. So remember, to figure out the mean, you're going to add up all the numbers in the list. For this one, they add to give you 154. And then you're going to divide by the number of numbers in the list. And this one has 11 numbers in the list. You get 14. And so 154 divided by 11 gives you 14. So your mean is 14. And then remember, to figure out the standard deviation, this must be done on the calculator. So you'll use the link that your teacher provided to you for that online calculator. And for this one, for the standard deviation, you get 3.4. Once you have the mean calculated, and once you've used the online calculator to figure out your standard deviation, now you're ready to answer the question. So the data that are within 1 standard deviation from the mean, I'm going to take the mean and subtract the 3.4, and then I'll take the mean and I'll add the 3.4. And so for this one, I'll get that the numbers that fall within 1 standard deviation from the mean are the numbers that are between 10.6 and 17.4.